Hi PJ, how are you doing?
Good, Carolina. How are you?
I'm okay, getting ready for winter, but there we are. Welcome to the next episode of the Revolutionary Journey. Winter's coming, so what are we going to talk about today?
Today, I think we'd want to talk about the value and concept of frameworks. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neither? And all that. So,
Yes,
yeah, I think that's how it helps or hinders.
yeah, one of my favorite topics where I usually have a lot to say. Let me start with this with a story. I'm a person that likes to read a lot. In recent years, it became more books about business and non-fiction books that are very interesting. A lot of them have similar threads through them. So like I guess there's this part where like, when you start reading about like leadership, even like a certain type of leadership that maybe more interested in, there is a certain thread that like you see repeating. But then you also like sometimes listen to podcasts and so on. And I experienced this some time ago. I was working with a leader and it was funny because every quarter you all usually start planning, right? You start this process of what are we gonna do next quarter? What is our mission? What are we gonna like all this stuff. It became really interesting because basically I would hear the ideas and then I'll be like, oh, they just read this book. Interesting. Let's see where we are going. And then the next 3 months, I'd be like, oh, now they read this one. I see. We're changing things a little bit. And this was how I started the love-hate relationship because the love there is very small with frameworks. By frameworks, maybe let's specify what we mean here. I'm talking about the OKR, so objectives and key results, big rocks, other goal setting thing that you might have, or the way of doing sprints to ship fast, or anything that you hear that is like, this is the way we do things in this company. And then now there is this framework that we have discovered. And like, here it is, the world. You can use OKRs now because we did that and it worked for us. And here's the framework. So that was like an interesting part for me when I started reading a lot of this stuff, started recognizing, okay, I see what's happening here. And what I say it's like a love-hate relationship, maybe for me it's really about I don't like copying things. And I think that when we talk about frameworks, we keep on forgetting that it's a frame that works in a specific context, and sometimes it doesn't. What's your experience there?
Yeah, I I have a similar relationship that you have. I would even say love, hate, loathe relationship. I work typically on the business and the people side. So frameworks is like trading baseball cards. Truly, it's like, hey, have you seen? Do you have OKRs? No, we have KPIs. What's the difference? It's like, well, and you can have a whole conversation and dissertation on unraveling the jargon
Yes.
of framework, right? When I've seen it work successfully is when people take an iterative approach to frameworks, meaning they're going to take pieces of this framework A and pieces of framework B, meld it together because that's what it serves the purpose and the task of what they're doing. When I see it not work, it's literally when you're jamming a square peg into a round or triangle hole. Yes, eventually with enough force, you're going to get it through, but you're going to leave a lot of residue behind. For example, there was this one small company I was working with, and they tried to mimic large organizations in the sense that they had an annual presentation of company-wide OKRs. They spent a half-day workshop parsing that out into different functional frameworks. And I had a question, though. It was a very unpopular question, by the way. Do you think you're large enough to warrant this big exercise? Right? Because if I think about a company of less than 200, it's oftentimes a CEO that's doing 7, 8 different roles. It's oftentimes the chief marketing officer is also doing some talent or recruiting. So you're forcing them to have not just one subset of ARs or KPIs, you're forcing them to have upwards of 7, 10. So it doesn't serve this purpose. Why don't you just talk about the overarching goal? Are you looking to achieve a specific funding round, right? Going back to the original question, I think frameworks serve. a specific task, but you need to be very intentional and understand what those frameworks are and how they work, and be okay with saying, actually, I'm not going to take this element because it doesn't serve. That's my take on it. It's a love, hate, loathe relationship, and it's kind of like a buffet. Take what you like, leave what you don't.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think this is something that so often gets forgotten when we are working on a even more strategic level. When I sometimes work with an organization, helping like you define what are we after and so on. Sometimes we are so focused on the form that it needs to have that we just close ourselves to it. It's like maybe in a way, it's sometimes it's the framework, sometimes it's also the org chart. We need to make it work because we have this many departments and they all need to do this kind of things, or we need to make it work because we have this objectives and key results, and this is the general objective, and we need to flow it down, and this is how it's done. Yeah, okay. So my problem there is taking something that someone else achieved and just trying to plug it in without taking out the journey. You don't go through the process. When someone actually developed that framework and made it work for them, they went through this whole iterative process of testing and trying this, trying that, and you just forget all that journey. You just completely just forget it. By the way, very often what happens is that company at the time as I were developing that framework, they were growing. And they were first in the stage of trying to find the product market fit, then they were really growing. And then at the moment when you start hearing about the frameworks that they use and so on, they are in this steady, we have profit, we're good, and so on. And then this is the framework that worked for us. So you're also taking something that is from a completely different part of journey that where your organization is, especially when we're talking about like startups and scale ups, and you're just trying to like fit it in there and make sure that it works, right? And that's the part where I feel like somehow we need to find a way of like allowing yourself to have the flexibility to actually take what serves and discard everything else. Like you said, this is such an important part of like working with frameworks and different ways of doing things. I don't know. Why do you think it's so lost in the organizations that we're just trying to turn it in?
I think it's because as a company grows, as you know, you use the word stabilize, but I often, even with larger organizations where capital is secure and revenue is flowing, it's very seldom that I've seen them stable. You know,
True, 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 true.
I would just say like when capital is secured, right?
Yeah,
This is going to be a general statement. In my experience, people like stability. They like a feeling of
absolutely.
control.
Yeah.
And having this framework in place and buying it, it allows them to control the levers and control their day, control the input and control the output. That's
No,
the
I
thing.
would argue there. I would say like that it gives the feeling of control, but it not
Correct.
necessarily gives the control.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. And that's it. Like it gives
Mm.
the illusion or the feeling that they are in control.
Yeah.
They get to control the input, but also the narrative. So
Mhm.
it's just like, hey, you're not considering these other variables. In fact, you're leaving it out. Going back to the square peg, triangle hole, you're leaving out all of these things that made its form original and right. So what are we going to do with these remnants now?
Yeah.
And it's like they're like, oh, it doesn't fit in the framework. We leave it out. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So
Because what I encountered in a lot of the interactions in my work is also that they say like, no, but if we don't implement it the right way, it's not gonna work.
I hate that phrase, the right way. Who dictates? Like seriously,
That book
and
about
you know,
OKRs that you just read tells you the right way. Yeah.
the right way. I use the word hate intentionally and consciously. I hate it. Like do it the right way. Make it better. Make it like who like this book is saying, but like did that author work in this context? Did they
No,
work at
yeah,
this cat?
yeah, 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 and I guess that's what we're getting to, right? Like that everything that it is very often what happens with frameworks, and this is by the way, like frameworks that we come to when it comes to like a company strategy, like how we build things and whatever, you can implement frameworks, but it is also very much on a personal level. When you say, I'm going to start using this goal setting framework for myself,
Yeah.
to, achieve certain results that I'm after, right? So that's the whole thing there. So it's like, just want to make sure that it's like it works for both. It's the same way, and it's the same rigidity that we have in implementing them. And the thing that I think very often we forget about this is taking a step back and thinking about the context. Thinking about what is this, how is my situation similar to this organization that I'm trying to be like? How is my situation different from them? It's somehow lost in this whole, we don't think about it. We just say, look, they did it a couple of years ago. It really worked for them. So now we're going to do it and it's going to work for us as well. Is it because we're stubborn?
No, no, if I think about the value or the original thought about frameworks, it's to obviously create a nice, neat box,
Mhm.
but also to quantify things. So, and that's, I think, also why some frameworks don't work. It's there are things you truly cannot synthesize into a number. For example, the feeling of corporate culture or work culture. You can't really synthesize that. Yes, you can pull out different anecdotes and what makes this work culture work. Is it this feeling of family? Is it this feeling of fail fast and recover faster type of thing? I feel like it makes things a bit more neat in a box, or at least
Mm,
gives the illusion of being neat. And I believe that's, at least with the people I worked with, that's why they tend to navigate towards this.
mm,
It's like it creates order and it creates kind of like a mecca or a goalpost. Like,
yeah.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
We know that that's a number two. We need to make that a number 12. How do we make that a number 12?
Yeah, that's true. And then there's this part that actually goes into exactly what you were saying about we want to measure, we want to quantify, and so on. And it's all great. But the thing is that some things are very hard to measure, and it's very hard to find proxies for some things, like a culture. How do you measure culture? And then people say, like, the NPS score, like the Net Promoter Score, is like the measure of a culture. I'm like, is it? But anyway, that, we can go into the details of those measures really. And I know you have strong opinions there, but the point is
But
that,
again,
yeah,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
no, no, you
But
go.
again,
Yeah.
the MPS score is like it works in large organizations.
Mm,
If you have a company of 50, if you have a company of 200,
hmm.
and you're relying on the NPS, I'm sorry, you need a different role. Like, it's like,
But like, look, that's an interesting thing because so many organizations that I work with have, like, um, in order to measure the, like, the well-being of our employees, we are gonna, work with the NPS score, and our goal is to have an NPS score of a certain value. I mean, this is so pervasive.
yeah. But and it's also like, I was part of an organization where even getting people to respond to these surveys was a chore. And I'm like,
Hmm.
you're missing one of the most crucial points. People don't want to even engage with this survey.
No, and people
And you're
don't.
putting,
Yeah.
yeah. And they're like, well, let's make it fun. Let's just say, hey, if we get above 70%, the head of this function will paint their face purple and do a dance on TikTok. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this has now become a marketing exercise.
Yeah.
This has become a trope. This has become a gimmick. We're missing the point. You're distracting these people with this tchotchke that's not going to last. How about we first investigate why these people are not responding to these surveys? Only 40% are responding. For me, let's figure out what those 60% are doing so we can see, hey, is this a capacity issue? This is a capability issue. Do they really believe or do they think that these surveys are just nonsensical? That
Yeah.
to me is more interesting. I want to figure that out. I
Mm,
don't want to force them into this framework of
mm.
answering yes, no, answering on a Likert scale, so I can get my nice, neat response and say, oh, okay, people did this, people did that.
No, exactly. And
Yeah.
the interesting part there is, like, trying to understand why is it so, why do you have to, remind people about, like, hey, by the way, we have this survey running for 2 more weeks and please answer. We have 20% participation, we need to go to this, like, and this all these messages that the leaders of the department need to send to actually make it work. So why is that so hard? Why would, like, what would make people um, want to do it actually easier? So the thing that I'm thinking is that the frameworks are supposed to be, again, frame of work that works
Yes.
for you, right? So the context is everything here, right? And um like, do you have any examples that you can think of where you were very successful in implementing a certain framework in an organization? What made it so?
If the question is, have I used the framework as it stands, plug
Mm.
and play, been successful? The answer is no.
Yep.
And I think that's very telling.
Yeah.
I've seen success treating frameworks like a buffet. Take what works, take what you like, leave the rest. The leaders I work with, the professionals I work with, will say the same.
Mm.
So I actually challenge somebody who would say, who would take a framework that they designed and put it into two or three, actually one other organization as is, no compromises, and see the same, if not more success than
No,
they did with it. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. That's why a lot of, let's say, the successful and famous frameworks that work, they actually start working after going through the whole process of like redesigning and adapting it to your specific context. I can tell you about my professional example where I work with organizations where helping them define what is the strategy that they want to work on, how do they really think about what is it that they are after. And the question I sometimes get is like, yeah, but what will work for us? I'm like, well, I don't know before we get in there, right? So we need to sit in the room. We need to understand. I need to like understand the context of like, where you are at the moment, what works, what doesn't work, what are the struggles that you're having, how are people feeling, and like there's so much that goes into it. And just saying, like take these 3 steps and then that's gonna work for you. It's never works.
exactly. You're getting to the point here where frameworks is kind of like a treatment plan. If you Google and drag and drop it, you're going to see some successes here or there, but like very, very small successes. But you're not going to get to the heart of the challenge
Yeah.
or the task because that framework, you haven't thoroughly vetted your symptoms. You haven't thoroughly vetted like what actually is going on here, right? Same thing like a treatment plan. There's a reason why we have doctors and professionals in places because they want to take a snapshot of your current health states and then put you on a treatment plan to get you to your ideal state, right? So I've said this now 4 or 5 times now. My recommendation as a professional who's used it for over a decade, really treat frameworks like a buffet, and I would even say like treat it like a medical treatment plan. Cannot use all of those because if you have an organization of 200 versus 2000 versus 20,000, you're going to have different challenges at different inflection points. It's kind of like I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
have a metaphor. It's just not right.
No, absolutely. What makes it right and what actually I've seen work, this is both as an organization and as an individual, where like whatever it is that you're working on your health, your mental health, physical health, whatever, right? It always starts with jumping on this magical train of self-awareness and discovering where you really are at the moment,
Yeah.
and what's working and what's not working, and what are your values and beliefs that no longer serve you and which one do serve you. Yeah. And that's like the basic place where you start, right? The biggest challenge that I find here with startups that are starting to scale, that are starting to see their first success and starting to grow, um, being brutally honest with yourself, like, those are the things that worked for us, but they no longer serve us, and we need to let go of them, and we need to find out different ways. So it's a really difficult process, and it's really a lot of back and forth with mostly the founders team to like find a way of like, look, this is actually, you know, helping you let go of those things is a challenge. it really starts with understanding where you are. For me myself, this has become a big life changer when I started to stop and think about what's working, what's not working, and then trying to add like, why is it working? Why is it not working? And what, is there any specific context that makes it work, or any specific circumstances where I see it work better or not? And having those moments to just stop and think is very important. And maybe this is a little bit off topic, but also very related to the frameworks itself, is that I found that some of the best ideas and best ways to move forward come in the moment when you stop consuming and start creating.
Yes. I love that. It's kind of like writing your thesis paper.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to stop doing research and start writing,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's like, that's exactly what it is. Like, just, I think the best framework is just try shit. If it works,
Yeah.
figure out why it works and try to replicate that. For example, I was helping a client with brand employer branding, and they're a very small company, less than 100. They're like, I want to be like best in class like Google. And I was like, listen, Google has like 100,000 employees globally, and they have an entire that's 10 times your size dedicated to the brand, the reach and relevance of Google. So it's like, you want to do that, you need to employ 10 times what you are right now. Come on.
Yeah.
You need to set your goals, and you need to set the frameworks that you leverage according to where you are. Again, going back to self-awareness from the
Yeah.
original podcast, be self-aware of your journey right now, respect and honor that. And it's okay to have aspirations past that, but treat it aspirational first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that you can be the best in class, but be very conscious about what is your class. Make your, I'm absolutely, I want to be the best in the world in what I do. But the world that I do it for is very small. Because my goal is not to serve everyone. I have a very specific type of leaders and type of organizations that I want to work with. And I really do want to be best in the world, in that world. But I don't want to be best in the whole world because there's organizations that I maybe don't have aspirations to work with, and that's okay. That's my choice, yeah, because I know what I like, and just maybe having that kind of idea in your head. It's like, yeah, you can be the best in the world, but make that work that you actually care about.
Exactly. Be the best in art class.
Yeah.
Get creative.
There's a lot
Yeah,
of different ways to approach it, and then it goes to the part when you want to serve everyone, you actually serve no one because no size fits all. Framework, no framework fits all. You gotta have to, make it yours to make it work for you.
exactly. And I think that's just the thesis of what we're saying here. It's like, come on, take, take what you need, leave what you don't,
Yeah.
But I think if we take a step back, more importantly, before you get to the frameworks, it's this self-awareness kind of snapshots. Like, who are you? Where are you? Where do you want to go? Start there first, and then start considering frameworks.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of building whatever it is, the life for yourself or an organization. Be start with like figuring out who you are and who do you want to be when you grow up, and then go from there. Anything else on this topic that you think is important to mention?
I guess going back to a question I had on how does plugging and playing a framework affect thinking patterns and
Mhm.
problem solving, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like we've covered that, or what are your thoughts there?
Okay, so let's go. The thing is like, did you ever get something that is plug and play and it actually plugged and play? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm talking everything.
even take that
And
one. Yeah,
I have, let's say there's very, very few things in the world that you can actually plug and play. Let's talk about, I don't know. We both moved a lot. Every time you move, you get a new internet connection. They always say it's plug and play. And you always end up on the service call with that person that told you it's going to be plug and play because something is not working. And it's going to be the same thing with any framework that you're going to do. You're going to be ending up in a room with your leadership team and figuring out why is it not working? Like, what is it that why did we not get it done and so on and so on.
There's a need in a satirical market to like redo those pamphlets. It's like it's not plug and play. It's plug, fiddle with it, scratch your head, go like this, cuss it out, and then like fiddle with it some more, and then search for the problem on the internet, and then call the number and be like, it's not working. And then they use the almighty should word, and then they do something on the back end, and then it plays. A
Yeah,
huge chunk of the fiddle.
that's how it usually work. And that's the thing. And I also see that what happens, and maybe that's an important one to mention as well, is there is the part about the iteration that you mentioned already, that sometimes even like, you go through it and say like, okay, we're gonna do this thing now and so on and so on. And I often see also that you don't give it enough time. You will try it for two
Yes.
quarters, and then you say it's not working, and then you will get a new thing. And that is actually maybe even worse because you're just creating so much, taking so much energy, like the just mental energy from everyone in the organization by changing the type of framework that you're plugging in every couple of quarters, every year, and so on. People are exhausted by that. People are exhausted. And this is something that I really want more organization to start thinking very, very consciously about. I'm not saying stick to what doesn't work, but before you change it, understand why it doesn't work and what about it didn't work. Before you go and say, no, you're just gonna like, we're not doing the
Yeah.
OKRs now, we're gonna do big rocks.
Yeah. Oh my God, you just hit a nerve there for me. Whenever an executive will tell me, we did this for 2 quarters, it doesn't work, we're going to table it. You're telling me it doesn't work, but why doesn't it work? And why wasn't this considered in the beginning, right? So you really need to do the work in actually scoping the task and the
Yeah.
challenge at hand, number one. Number two, if you're saying it doesn't work in that moment, let's say after like 2 quarters, what are you going to do different to make this next strategy work? Because now you're losing face, you're losing confidence, credibility, and all that stuff. So, what are you going to do in this next iteration to make it work? Because the solution can't be an overhaul of strategy.
Yeah.
Because for me, you've now lost 6 months worth of work. Now you're asking these people to reset, to reconfigure, to some points do a 180. You can say organizations need to, or people need to be agile and flexible and all that stuff. But for me, that's a bullshit narrative because you're telling us that we need to be agile and flexible because you weren't thorough.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, there is, when you are maybe in a part of being a startup and you're still trying to figure out what this product is, what are we really trying to do? Of course, you're going to shift. Of course, you're going to change your product and so on. But that's different from just shifting the way you operate. And yes, there's needs to be the adjustment, but I also feel like that what I experience is sometimes people don't have that energy in them to go through all those changes all the time because they also don't understand why they're happening. And when we come as leaders with this part of like, look, we tried this, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. We learned from this and we're taking this forward, and this is how we want to do things, how we want to try doing things now. And we're going to see if it works. And we understand that it's a change in the way we operate. It's a completely different narrative from just like, let's go, let's do this now. Yeah, it's changes
Yeah,
how people approach it.
exactly. You hit the nail on the head there where people people don't like change, period. Especially to learn new things. It tends to be uncomfortable for them. So if you're asking them to do that in very short intervals, you're creating this climate of stress.
Hmm.
And some people may respond well to it, but I think most people won't. I've seen organizations where they like to create that stress because they're like, "Oh, you get the best results." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, you don't actually, and that's a different topic.
Yeah.
There's this part that we need to understand, and I'm a health and wellness geek. I spend so much time going on this. Stress long term is not good for anyone, and that's the whole point, no matter what you say. And I know that there's organizations that kind of put it there that, fine, you're just gonna work here for 3 years, you're gonna give us all of you, and then you're gonna go because you're gonna be fed up with this. And some organizations are fine with that. I'm not fine with those organizations. Yeah, that's me. So I guess there's also the part that maybe what you mentioned is that a thing that I believe is like your urgency because you failed on a certain thing. Don't make it my urgency, right? So that this part about like be aware as a leader
Yeah.
of why are you putting urgency on certain things and where is that because of what's happening on the market, where is that because of like what was predictable but not acted on, right? So I know we were just like a broken record, but it all boils down to being self-aware
Yeah.
as an organization as well. It is just such an important part and something that we really don't talk about a lot. I feel like that a lot of narratives about how to be better, build business and save the world, whatever. We just spend so little time about talking of self-awareness, knowing where you are and understanding.
Yes. So I think if we have to boil down this episode, it really just starts with understanding who you are, number one. So like who you are and who you want to be. You need to figure out if they're the same, if they're different, and then you decide where you want to go from there, right? Number two, treat these frameworks and any advice really as a buffet.
Mhm.
Take what works for you, actually figure out what works with you, but leave the rest. So I think those are the two main theses.
Yeah, agree. Very nicely summarized. Thank you for that. And I think that's really what we need to be conscious about. Like, take everything that works for you and discard the rest, and be very critical about it.
Yeah, exactly. And
Thank you,
celebrate
PJ.
throwing stuff.
Yes, celebrate it. And celebrate, you know what? Like that's the important part. Celebrate when you find out that something doesn't work for you and you can give it like just let go of it. Those are like the moments where you like when you discovered something that is just no longer serving you and you don't you're like it's like taking out this iron chain from yourself and just like there, there it went.
I don't know why, but my mind is going to. Have you seen the movie Tangled?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, so it's a modern take on Rapunzel, but
Okay.
they have this lantern festival every year and they release thousands of lanterns. It'll be a cool ceremony if you fail, where if you write the idea on the lantern and then you just like
Yes,
make it go up.
absolutely. Make it go away, make it
Exactly.
let go of it. That's it's very,
Yeah.
very important to do that. I like that idea. We can do the something
Yeah.
there. Thank you, PJ. This was a good conversation and I hope it was helpful for someone. Thank you. See you next episode.